Welcome back, everyone. Big day for America. Trump just announced that he's going to run for president in 2024. You might have seen the announcement last night. It was at 9 p.m. he started. I watched the whole thing, so I'm going to give a recap on the major points he talked about. Basically, what Trump did was laid out why he's running, why he believes it's necessary, and what his campaign messages are going to be. I'll give kind of an overview of that. Although, if you're interested, I do recommend watching it. We did have the live up on Epic TV. Also, I would argue that we're watching the death of the Republican Party as we knew it. It's very much like that old saying, the king is dead, long live the king. The idea being that the king dies, but there's an immediate successor. The question now is, what will that successor be? And I'm not the only one saying this. You see this at the top levels of the Republican leadership. You even see the Democrats saying it. The Republican Party as we knew it is no more. It is dead. And it's going to turn to something else. The question will be, what will that be? If Trump can have his way, it looks like it's going to be a reformed party representing the MAGA movement. There are other systems at play trying to reform it in other ways. I'll be detailing what those are and kind of my idea of where things are heading with this. You also see breakages taking place within the conservative establishment. Murdoch Media, being Fox News, New York Post, Wall Street Journal, they're all going anti-Trump. National Review is maintaining its anti-Trump stance. Remember, they lost like 40% of their readers last time around when they did this. They just did it again. It's going to be interesting, folks. We're going to be entering a very, I'd say maybe positive in terms of free speech, but a time of many conflicts, let's say, where basically you're going to be witnessing an ideological battle that will decide the future of the United States. I'm going to explain my views on this and kind of how I see the different players working within this system and kind of what we can expect to see as this whole drama plays out. It's going to be very interesting to watch. I guess kind of be a part of as well. And folks, as this is taking place, something else major is happening right now, which is the censorship establishment is crumbling. The systems, the powers that be that allowed for mass censorship to take place are beginning to fall. And in their place is a new system that actually is more in line with what the internet used to be prior to, I'd say, 2010. And I'm going to explain to you why 2010 really matters, and in ways that I honestly haven't seen anybody even really talk about since like 2011 or 2012. How many of you remember the statecraft initiative under Hillary Clinton? Does anyone remember that? It was under Barack Obama, 2010-ish, where they changed the way that diplomacy is done and they began using the internet, including technologies to monitor elections. Does anybody remember this? If you don't remember it, I'm going to remind you, because this is like a forgotten part of history that completely changed the way that governments interact with the internet. And you can't understand what's happening now unless you understand that. I'm going to go into that today. Folks, that said, there's a lot of stuff I want to talk about. There's too much in one episode, so I'm going to talk about some other stuff probably next week as well, including, for example, that they're launching now the digital currency. The Federal Reserve in New York is launching a digital dollar. It is now upon us. It is now happening. Klaus Schwab gave a recent speech explaining, the state of the New World Order and the Great Reset. You're going to have this ideological battle, as I've explained, taking place, and the players on all fronts are kind of gearing for war. Ideologically, I'd say it's going to be interesting. That said, folks, again. My documentary, The Final War, is now available. You can watch it on Epic TV. You might have seen it yesterday. It aired at around 9 a.m. Around 10 a.m. I think, and went till about noon. If you haven't seen it yet, please watch it. Please share it. Help us get the word out. Again, just like this show, it's all grassroots, so help us get the word out on that. That said, folks, let's jump into the first story for the day. I want to start with some breaking news. The Republicans have now officially taken the House of Representatives. Remember, they needed 218 seats to get a majority in the House. They've lost the Senate, but the House. They've now gotten 219, meaning they've secured the vote by one. They've secured the seats by one additional seat right now. It's a solid take. They have it now. Um, Anything beyond it at this point, because there are still some that are contested, is just going to strengthen their majority. This is going to be interesting because technically, Republicans can now launch investigative committees. It means they take over the January 6th committee. It means they can do election fraud investigations. It means they can look into Hunter Biden. They can look into Dr. Fauci. They're already gearing up for these different investigations. The big question is going to be who's the Speaker of the House. It does look like Kevin McCarthy might get it, but there's some fighting taking place for that. We will see, folks. The other important part to mention is that not all Republicans are like MAGA Republicans. There's going to be a lot of infighting within the party. And so even if Republicans do hold the House, it's likely that not all of them are going to vote in lockstep for everything that comes through. Many of them are still going to side with Democrats. It's not going to be like a Democrat majority where pretty much they all vote the same. Many Republicans are like Bush-era Republicans, and they're going to be voting with those. Some are more libertarian, and they're going to be voting both sides. Some are MAGA, and they're going to be voting with the kind of the more populist MAGA movement. And I think this is one of the defining pictures of the party right now, which again I'm going to go into today. That said, folks, real quick before I get into Trump's policies, we do have a sponsor today. Today's episode is brought to you by American Hartford Gold. Those of you who invest in gold may be quite happy right now, although there's some stuff taking place behind the scenes. Basically, there's what they call whales mass buying up gold right now. This is kind of separate from this thing. There's major purchasers of gold, and nobody knows who they are. There's some speculation it might be a nation state, but someone's trying to buy up like tons and tons of gold right now. Which, gold tends to not be as affected by economic shifts and so on. It tends to be relatively stable, even if it goes down and up a bit. But folks, we do have a sponsor today, again, American Hartford Gold. I'd like to thank them as well. And as we've been talking about, inflation is going to continue and likely to get worse. Even Fed Chair Powell is warning us to brace ourselves. Well, there's one way to hedge against inflation. American Hartford Gold makes it simple and easy to diversify your savings and retirement accounts with physical gold and silver. With one short phone call, they can have physical gold and silver delivered right to your door or into your IRA or 401k. American Hartford Gold is one of the highest rated firms in the country with an A+ rating from the BBB and thousands of satisfied clients. If you call them right now, they'll give you up to $2,500 of free silver and a free safe on qualifying orders. So don't wait, call them now. That's 877-260-2764. Again, 877-260-2764. Or you can text Joshua to 65532. Again, 877-260-2764 or text Joshua to 65532. And again, big thanks out to American Hartford Gold for sponsoring today's episode. All right, folks, that said, let me go into what's happening with Trump's run for president. I watched the entire speech yesterday. I don't know how popular it was, to be honest. I've heard mixed reviews of the speech. Jeb Bush is calling Trump low energy Bush because remember Trump used to call Jeb Bush low energy Jeb. I've heard from people. I was talking to a few people who are generally very pro Trump. Some of them said that they believed he was lower energy. I personally did not feel that way. I thought it was very solemn. I felt he was maybe not as banging on the gong like he usually is, but I didn't have that feeling. I think it's up to each individual how they felt with it, but it was interesting. Basically, Trump, in my opinion, is kind of reviving the same spirit he did back in 2016, where he's running not as a politician, but he's running basically as an American trying to bring power back to the American citizen. He's campaigning on a few key issues, which I'll go over now. One of the big ones is he wants to stop election fraud. He's very much aware of this, and actually he's one of the few Republicans who's actually still going very strong on this topic. The narrative of this election conspiracy or election deniers, coupled with the narrative that somehow he started an insurrection on January 6th, those two things are what the establishment, both Republicans and Democrats and most of the Murdoch media empire, are using to try to challenge Trump. The narrative coming from Mike Pence right now, for example, Mike Pence, former vice president, is he's trying to make Trump out to be a conspiracy theorist based on these two issues, and Pence is kind of backstabbing Trump, especially on the January 6th issue. They're trying to make it appear that there's no such thing as election fraud, and they're saying by claiming there's election fraud, Trump is, by extension of that, basically like misleading people and all, rigging votes and so on. I'll tell you, it exists, and it exists in a very strong way. Trump is the only one right now, the only major one, really, really looking to take this on. And we'll see what he can do, but he is campaigning on basically trying to have something done about it. And being still the kingmaker and one of the really the leading figure, whether people like it or not, in the Republican Party, he's going to try to use his influence to push for investigations and other things into this. He made it clear that he expects to be attacked. He is expecting this. He knows what he's up against. Remember that they tried the Trump-Russia scandal. They tried the fake sexual assault charges. They tried everything against Trump. And basically, rather than him collapsing, the people accusing him basically collapsed in some regards. The last one they got him with was, of course, the old Fauci 1-2. Lockdowns and so on, which they then used to create new election laws, which they used to win the elections, universal mail-in ballots and so on. He's looking to take all that on. He's looking to take all of that on. At the same time, he's also talking about something which is actually new and I would say probably more controversial, at least among the kind of the establishment. He's talking about making it so that drug dealers get the death penalty. He noted that if you look at the average deaths caused by your average drug dealer over their lifetime, it's about 500 people, meaning that every drug dealer, essentially, you could call them mass murderers. And if you understand that 100,000 Americans were killed by fentanyl, like in last year alone, more Americans than died in the entire Vietnam War, it's pretty dang significant. I mentioned before that drugs are part of the Chinese Communist Party's drug warfare model against the United States. Technically, this is a war. And when you're dealing with not only drug dealers in the streets, but Mexican cartels, narco-terrorist organizations, and even terrorist organizations like in Afghanistan under the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, a lot of their operations are financed through drugs. It's going to be very big if he does that. It's going to be very controversial as well, as I think he campaigns on this. But if you understand the downtrodden in America and, let's say, poorer communities in America, whether it's like Appalachia or like inner cities, these would be actually decent places were it not for drugs. Drugs are one of the major causes of a lot of the problems you have in a lot of these areas. I know in California, I've talked to sheriff's deputies, about 70% of crime is caused by the homeless community, and most of that is drugs. It's not that they're homeless against their will. Many of them want to live like that. And it's drugs. The mental illness crisis, it's drugs. Drugs are one of the greatest, I think, harms that is being given to the American people. And Trump is looking to do something about that. The other side is by taking a very strong stance of sentencing them to death. He also does away with one of the other key issues, which is a lot of the recruiting for some of the worst gangs happens in the prison system. The prison system doesn't necessarily reform people. It doesn't fix issues. Typically, it's going to take a criminal and make them more of a criminal, especially because typically you'll be forced. If you go to prison, you're going to be forced more often than not into a gang usually related to your race. There's black gangs, there's Mexican gangs, there's white gangs. Guys like me who are mixed race get put in with the weirdos. They call them the others. So I've been told. And typically, if that happens to you, you have to do work for the gang, which includes smuggling drugs and other things. It's once you're in the system, it's very hard to get out of it. And once you're in the system, you get deeper and deeper into it. The prison system doesn't fix it. Suggesting the solution is to execute them for that crime is very strong. But I will say that if you understand the nature of capital punishment, it's not really about killing people. It's more about preventing people from doing it in the first place. And having such a strong punishment will basically made 99% of people who would normally consider that not to do it in the first place. The people who will do it will be more the hardened criminals, meaning it's going to be interesting. He's also campaigning on restoring law and order. Another important thing, he wants to restore positions back to service members who were kicked out of the military over COVID and refusing to get vaccines. And he wants to give them back pay. That's probably going to get him a lot of the military vote, actually. He wants no more insider trading for members of Congress. Folks, if you look at like members of Congress and they're making like $170,000 a year, something like that, and they're all like multi-millionaires over just the course of a few years, even like Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, who talks about the evil millionaires and billionaires, dude, she is a multi-millionaire. She's like ridiculously rich. And she's ridiculously rich way beyond the threshold of her income. Why is that? It's a very common thing, unfortunately, among members of Congress. And frankly, this will be one piece in fixing that issue. The special interest loop where they pass laws and so on and regulations that are very much in line with their own personal financial interests, and where they often have their friends or family members invest or maybe encourage them to invest in ways that they know are going to benefit them. They can get away with it. They have exceptions to laws that you and I would go to jail for, that Martha Stewart would go to jail for, that they don't have to follow. He's also saying no more men in women's sports. Yes, they are men. They're not women, and no more of them in women's sports. In fact, there's actually been some rulings on this already. A court just overturned Biden's whole gender policy. It's probably going to go up higher. So I don't usually like making a big deal over lower court rulings because they're going to keep getting overturned, and I give updates every other month, making it seem like things are different when they're really not. Until it goes to the Supreme Court, we're probably not going to hear the end of that. But there was a significant ruling from one of the major courts just recently, basically overturning Biden's rules that allow men to compete in women's sports, claiming that they think they're women. And one of the important things with this is it clarifies identity, whether you identify as being a certain gender versus the gender you actually are. And they're saying that identity is not gender. That's a major, major determination, and Trump's going to go off on this as well. He's also saying he's going to do something about the free cash handouts to all these random countries. We don't know. Frankly, most Americans, we don't know where the money even goes. America gives hundreds of millions of dollars to like all kinds of countries in the world. We're like the sugar daddy of like half the world. It's ridiculous. We not only that, but we support the militaries of most of Europe. America bankrolls pretty much the entire world, and because they don't have to pay basic things, they can use their extra surplus to create socialist policies. America is bankrolling socialism globally. One, by basically filling the defense budget of most of Europe, which allows them to have extra money so they can invest in things like socialized wealth, socialized healthcare, and so on. He's not talking about ending the military support, but he is talking about ending the free cash handouts to some extent, or at least using that to make sure that they don't do things against the United States, such as having mass open border policies throughout Latin America, for example. He mentioned El Salvador, I believe, in particular. He said Democrats, something very interesting, which is going to be one of his major platforms against Democrats. He says Democrats have come to represent a form of government based on tyranny and absolute power. That the model of government that they've basically created is one where essentially a small elite rule by force. They do whatever the heck they want, and they don't care so much about the people they're supposed to represent. I think some Americans actually do feel that to a pretty strong degree, where they feel that non-citizens get treated better than American citizens, that people entering the country illegally get put up in New York with free hotels and free room service, free food, free health care, while the American citizens are basically struggling paycheck to paycheck. That's something I think that's going to really resonate with a lot of Americans, ironically even with a lot of Latinos and so on, who Democrats, I think, really betted that would actually be for the open border policies when many of them are not. He's also saying that he will make America powerful again, wealthy again, strong again, proud again, safe again, glorious again, and he's using his slogan again, which is "Make America Great Again." And he's also campaigning on something very interesting, which he's saying this is not just a political campaign. He's saying a politician cannot fix the issues America is now facing. He's running as an American citizen, essentially, is the way he's framing it. And he says that this is not a political campaign. He says it is a quest to save America. And he basically, he's in other words, he's portraying his campaign not as just a normal political campaign, but instead a social movement. And as a social movement, Trump is basically, it looks like he's going to be rallying essentially the grassroots of America through his campaign and start up more, I think, again, a movement, really, that will work hand in hand with his political campaign. It's going to be very interesting. That being said, you're going to be watching a lot of shakeups take place within the Republican Party. I want to explain a bit of how this is working and how I see this playing out, because you have two major contenders right now. The main ones being Trump and DeSantis. DeSantis is not looking like he wants to run for president, and so, but it's ironic because pretty much the entire media establishment, Fox News, like a lot of the Democrat politicians, they're all trying to get DeSantis to run. Why does the establishment want him to run so badly when he himself doesn't sound like he wants to do it? It appears that basically, I'll get into this, folks. First, let me go into some of what's happening with the Republican Party. Let me show you this story from Reuters. It says Biden pleased with election turnout. It says it reflects quality of party's candidates. And this kind of lays out something interesting if you read further in. And actually the original headline on this, if you go back in the archives, actually says this more directly. Biden is saying that Republicans need to decide who they are. Who are the Republicans? That question is going to define the next 2 years for the United States. It says further into the article, the results have also signaled exhaustion with the kind of chaos fomented by the Republican former president, raising questions about the viability, they're talking about Trump, of course, of his possible 2024 White House run. L'Exalt, who lost in Nevada, was a former state attorney general endorsed by Trump. Biden told reporters the elections show the Republican Party, quote, is going to have to decide who they are. Some Republicans expressed discontent as they faced at least another 2 years in the minority. And Senator Josh Hawley tweeted as well, the old party is dead, time to bury it, build something new. So folks, who is the Republican Party? It's not a who are they, it is a who is they. Who is singular, meaning they're asking basically who's going to lead the party. Is essentially what they're doing. Because whoever leads the party is going to determine the identity of the party and the policies that the party represents. And if they build something new, the big question is, well, what will that be? We're likely going to watch infighting that will decide this, answer, basically. What will the party become? The main figures at the front, the two who actually have a chance, Trump and DeSantis, Trump much higher than DeSantis still in terms of polling. And then also Mike Pence trying to go to the forefront as well. Basically, right now, the establishment is throwing its weight behind DeSantis, even though, again, it's more them saying it than DeSantis. DeSantis is not suggesting he wants to do it. In fact, based on everything I've seen so far, he doesn't look like he wants to run against Trump. But the media and so on is really trying to do it. Even the Murdoch empire, the Murdoch media empire, Fox News, New York Post, Wall Street Journal, they're going really strong against Trump right now. Or at least they're going to be given that stance. And remember, important note, prior to 2016, prior to Trump winning the Republican nomination, remember these same outlets were mostly against him as well. Remember that basically they did not support him because they're establishment media. They're establishment media that tends to support or reject things based along party lines. And as soon as the Republican Party itself changes its position, the media then changes their position as well. They were never essentially pro-Trump, so to speak. They were pro-Republican, and Trump just so happened to win the Republican nomination, even though they almost didn't let him run. Do you remember that? It was only when he threatened to run as an independent that they changed their minds. I'll show you an example of this. Fox News right here. Ron DeSantis is the new Republican Party leader. according to Fox News. It says the biggest winner in the midterms was, without a doubt, Governor Ron DeSantis, whose landslide victory in the state of Florida was breathtaking. The biggest loser, Donald Trump, whose handpicked loyalist candidates in a number of races struggled to beat vulnerable Democrats. Once again, the former president may have cost Republicans control of the Senate in a year when it was theirs to lose. Many will conclude on the basis of the midterm results the Republican Party is ready to move on without Donald Trump as its leader. The New York Times is basically saying the same thing, pushing Ron DeSantis. New York Times in May 2022 said, Republicans need a new leader. They're looking to Florida. And New York Times said, 2 weeks ago, Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida appeared with the Fox News host Laura Ingraham for a town hall that lasted the full hour of her primetime show. That kind of airtime tends to be reserved only for Donald Trump, but Mr. DeSantis has made a meteoric rise. He's far and away the most popular potential 2024 president candidate among Republicans after Mr. Trump. Even if you would never, this is New York Times, even if you would never consider voting for him, DeSantis, it's important to understand the sources of his appeal and the direction of his politics, because one way or another, whether he ever runs for president or not, Ron DeSantis is the new Republican Party. The list goes on and on of media in the establishment that are basically doing this. Arizona Central says exclusive Mike Pence predicts better choices, not Trump, as the GOP's 2024 nominee. And Mike Pence is saying this, quote, I think there's a real desire for new leadership in the Republican Party, so help me God. And he's pushing his new book called So Help Me God. And he said, quote, everywhere I've gone across the country, I hear people that are very proud of the record of the Trump-Pence administration, but almost in the same breath, I hear people say they want leadership that reflects the respect and civility that most Americans practice every day. In other words, they're stating they want Trumpism without Trump. And that's the essence of the pitch Pence is making for himself as he contemplates his own bid for the White House. And Pence is arguing that he not only supported but also helped deliver the administration's accomplishments on the economy, immigration, pandemic, foreign policy. In other words, the way Pence is promoting himself is basically Trump policies without Trump. What you're looking at is basically Republicans who go back to the milquetoast days of not being fighters. Trump, by definition, and this is one of the reasons some of the Reagan-era Republicans don't like him, Trump is a fighter. He'll call people names. He'll insult people. He'll make up nicknames like Little Rubio, like lying Ted Cruz, and then he'll be friends with them a few weeks later. He'll insult people. He'll say Hillary Clinton would be in jail. He'll talk about these kinds of things, and he doesn't hold back any punches when it comes to what he sees as the major issues, especially when you're talking about, for example, what really happened in the midterms. Trump is talking about election fraud. Trump is talking about how the Republicans, McConnell and so on, basically, McCarthy, some of them he's claiming sabotaged the party from within, sabotage his own candidates. Trump is talking about the behind-the-scenes politics and the things that took place that basically made things the way they are. McConnell. Whereas most of the establishment, Pence and pretty much most of the Fox News empire and so on, most of the establishment is basically saying that any talk of election fraud and these things, for the most part, not all of them, but they're claiming that basically that's a big conspiracy and that Trump is pushing conspiracy theories. And they're framing the losses not as being based on election fraud, not as being sabotage within the Republican Party, but as being people not wanting to vote for Trump's candidates. And based on that, they're trying to push Trump out. That's the dynamic you're watching unfold right now. And it's interesting to note that a lot of them actually censored Trump's speech last night, or sometimes didn't even air it at all. And this could be kind of a sign of where things are going as Trump continues to campaign. Some media are going to basically try to pretend he's not even doing anything. Some media are going to try to basically write him off. This includes even even Fox News to some extent. They're being accused of this because they cut away from Trump's speech for 15 minutes. I'm going to explain this, folks, what's happening with this, why it matters, and I'm going to give some of my takes on the dynamic we're going to watch, the conflict we're going to watch play out, and some of my personal opinions on this. Before that, though, let's jump over exclusively to Epic TV because I'm always walking on eggshells with YouTube, and I don't like that. Come join us in the land of free speech. Come join us on Epic TV if you're on YouTube, Rumble. Rumble's okay, but come join us on Epic TV. Again, you also help Epic Times keep doing what we're doing. And we can air things like Trump's speech and not have to censor it. And you don't get the feed cut like you did in some other networks. Join us on Epic TV. I'll see you there. And again, I still have an hour show ahead, so come join us. Before we do cut, though, folks, again, my new documentary is now out. It released yesterday. It's called The Final War. This thing's been in the works like almost 2 years now. A ton of work went into this. This is really, in my opinion, like the definitive documentary explaining what's happening with the Chinese Communist Party's war plans and how that relates to some of the corruption in this country. I'm going to show you the trailer now, then we'll jump over.
The greatest threat facing the United States is the CCP.
The Epoch Times investigation team had studied the CCP for years, but what we uncovered was yielding evidence beyond our imagination.
With Chairman Mao, with the Prime Minister, our talks have been characterized by frankness.
The Clinton administration said, oh, don't worry about it. This will be a poison pill for China.
China's strategic goal is to make sure that the U.S. has 4 enemies, and one of them must be a terrorist group.
We are giving of our life's blood so that the Chinese Communist Party can survive and thrive.
All right, folks, again, that is on Epic TV now. If you haven't seen it yet, please watch it. Again, you can even sign up for a free trial with Epic TV and watch it. I encourage you all to do so, and let me know what you think, and also please share it. Again, help us get the word out. It's all grassroots. All right, folks, that says jump over exclusive at Epic TV, and I'll see you there. Oh, by the way, those of you wondering, today's tea is actually a ginseng tea. I wanted ginseng again today. It's one of my